my dad told my son at Thanksgiving. You're 16 and still don't have a job? Your cousin's already making six figures. My son works 3 part-time jobs to help me with bills. His face went red. I stood up and said, "You're right, Dad. He's learned the value of hard work. Unlike some people who've been living off my $4,500 monthly gift for the past 8 years, which just became $0. And that Tesla in your driveway? Mine. I'm picking it up tomorrow and my name is Brad Whitaker, and I'm 41 years old." This past Thanksgiving, my dad leaned back in his chair, took a slow sip of wine, looked straight at my 16-year-old son, and said loud enough for the whole table to hear, "You're 16 and still don't have a job? Your cousin's already making 6 figures." My son's face went red like someone had slapped him. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story really resonates with you. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. To understand how we got there, I need to take you back to the beginning. I grew up in a house where my dad's word was basically law, but his love had a price tag. My dad, Gary, worked in sales most of my childhood. He could charm a room, and he loved being the guy everyone turned to for advice. But behind closed doors, he was constantly stressed about money. Not, "We can't afford braces" stressed. More like, "I bought something impulsive and now everyone needs to adjust" stressed. My mom, Linda, was the steady one. She worked as an admin at the local hospital and kept us afloat with quiet consistency. If the lights stayed on, it was because Mom made it happen, not because Dad was some financial genius. I was the responsible kid, the one who did homework without being asked, who got a job as soon as I could, who learned to read the room and avoid setting Dad off. My older sister, Melissa, was the golden child. Dad called her his spark. She was social, pretty, the kind of person who could laugh off mistakes and still be adored. When Melissa totaled her first car at 17, Dad hugged her and said, "Accidents happen, sweetheart." When I scratched Dad's bumper backing out of the driveway at 16, he made me pay him back $600 from my grocery store paycheck and reminded me for years that I was careless. That wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was how normal it all felt, like I was born with a job title, the one who fixes things. There's a scene burned into my brain from when I was 14. Melissa wanted to go to a summer cheer camp that cost $1,200. Dad said yes on the spot, like it was pocket change. That same week, I asked for $80 for a math tutoring program because I was struggling and didn't want my grades to slip. Dad didn't even look up from the TV. "You're smart," he said. "Figure it out." I did. I found a neighbor who tutored me for $10 an hour, and I paid her myself. My mom slipped me $20 bills sometimes when Dad wasn't looking, like she was paying a ransom. Mom noticed. She always noticed. My one older ally in the family was my Aunt Marlene, Dad's older sister. She was the kind of woman who could slice through nonsense with one raised eyebrow. She never married, never had kids, and people assumed that meant she didn't get family. But she got it better than anyone. When I was 17 and my dad tried to borrow money from my savings account because he was short on a payment, Aunt Marlene found out and took me to a diner. She slid a napkin across the table and wrote one sentence on it. "Love without boundaries becomes obligation." Then she tapped the napkin and said, "Keep records, Brad. People forget what they took the moment you stop giving." At the time, I thought she was being dramatic. She wasn't. I became an economist because numbers felt honest. People could lie, but a spreadsheet couldn't. I went to college on scholarships and part-time work. I moved out as soon as I could. I built my life like a wall. Stable job, stable budget, stable plan. And for a while, I had it. Then my marriage fell apart. I'm not going to pretend I was some perfect husband who got blindsided by a cartoon villain. My ex-wife and I were both exhausted, both stressed, both convinced the other person should carry more of the load. When she left, she didn't take our son, Noah, away from me. We share custody, and I'm grateful for that. But financially, I took a hit. I had child support, I had my own rent, and I had the kind of unexpected expenses that show up when you're a single parent trying to keep a teenager fed, clothed, and not quietly spiraling. Noah was about 8 when my mom got sick. That's when my dad changed. Not emotionally, financially. Mom's illness meant hospital bills, time off work, stress. And Dad started calling me more. At first it was little things. "Hey, bud, can you cover the copay this month?" Then it became bigger. "We're behind on the mortgage because of all the medical stuff." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. I wanted my mom to be comfortable, and I didn't want my dad drowning, even if he had a habit of lighting his own house on fire and then asking for a hose. So I helped. I set up an automatic transfer for $1,500 a month. Here's what that number meant. $2,300 went to their mortgage. $600 was property taxes averaged out. $400 was insurance. The rest, supposedly, was for mom's care, and for groceries, and for the little things. I told myself it was temporary. Temporary lasted 8 years. Mom passed 2 years after the payment started. And instead of the transfer ending, Dad acted like it was now his pension. Like I'd inherited him. When I brought up stopping the payments, he'd get quiet and wounded. Your mother would be so disappointed, he'd say. And the thing is, my mom was the kindest person I've ever known. She would absolutely want her husband taken care of. But she would not want her son bled dry while her husband bought toys. Because Dad did buy toys. He always had a reason. The old car wasn't reliable. I needed something safe. My back hurts. I needed the nicer mattress. The neighbors upgraded. I can't be the only one with an old place. At some point, the toys became a Tesla. He didn't buy it outright, not at first. He came to me with the pitch like he was presenting to investors. Brad, it's not even a splurge, he said. It's smart. No gas. Low maintenance. It's basically saving money. I remember staring at him, thinking, I'm an economist, and you're really trying this on me? He had already test-driven it. He had already picked out the color. He had already told the salesman his son would handle the paperwork. I didn't want to fight. I had a teenager, a divorce, and enough stress to last a lifetime. So I did what I always did. I controlled the damage. I told him I'd finance it in my name, because my credit was better and the rate would be lower, but it would be my car legally. I'd insure it. I'd pay the loan. He'd reimburse me $700 a month out of the $4,500, which was ridiculous because the $4,500 was my money anyway. He agreed instantly, which should have been a red flag the size of a billboard. I kept the title in my safe. I kept the insurance in my name. I kept the loan linked to my bank account. I did it the way Aunt Marlene taught me. Paper, proof, control. Even then, I didn't realize how much resentment was building in Noah. Noah is a good kid. He's the kind of kid who says thank you without being reminded, who notices when I'm stressed, who tries not to ask for things because he knows money is tight. When he was 14, I had a stretch where work slowed down. I'm not unemployed, but economics isn't magic. Sometimes contracts end. Sometimes forecasts are wrong. Sometimes you can do everything right and still watch the numbers squeeze you. That year, the AC in my apartment died in July. The repair estimate was $1,900. My landlord played games. We'll get to it next week. Next week became 3. Noah slept on the couch because it was closer to the fan. I kept telling him it was fine, that it was temporary, that we'd manage. 2 days later, Noah came home and said, very casually, I got a job. I thought he meant a normal teen job. One job. He didn't. He had a part-time job at a grocery store 3 evenings a week. He was also doing early morning shifts at a cafe on weekends. And he'd started mowing lawns and doing basic yard work for 2 older neighbors in our complex, cash under the table, because they trusted him. 3 jobs. At 14. Not because he wanted sneakers. Not because he wanted a gaming computer. Because he heard me on the phone with the landlord, and he saw me calculating which bill could wait. The first time he handed me $120 in cash and said, this can go toward the electric. I felt like my chest cracked open. I told him no. I told him absolutely not. I told him he was a kid and it was my job to handle the bills. He looked me dead in the eye and said, it's our home too. So we made a deal. I let him keep most of it for himself and savings, and he'd contribute only when I was in a real pinch. But the truth is, even real pinch happened more than it should have. And all through that, my dad kept collecting his $4,500 like it was oxygen. Every month, automatic. Every month, no thank you. Every month, no questions about Noah. No offer to help. No, how are you holding up? Just, hey, the HOA fee went up, or, hey, my insurance premium changed, like I was his personal finance department. Aunt Marlene would call me and say, he's going to bleed you until you're a husk. I'd joke it off. I'd say, it's family. She'd pause and say, family doesn't invoice you, Brad. Then came this Thanksgiving. We were invited to Dad's house. the same house I'd been paying for since Noah was 8. Dad insisted. It's tradition, he said. People expect me to host. By people, he meant his friends and my sister's family, who liked the idea of my dad as the beloved patriarch. Melissa showed up with her husband and their son, Mason, Noah's cousin. Mason is a decent kid, but he's being raised in a bubble where every accomplishment is a performance. Melissa had been bragging for months that Mason was making 6 figures at 17. Something about an online business. Maybe it was true, maybe it wasn't. Either way, it became the measuring stick Dad used to whack Noah with. Noah had worked a cafe shift that morning. He came straight to Thanksgiving with tired eyes and a pressed shirt, trying to look like he wasn't exhausted. We brought food. Because of course we did. I brought a homemade sweet potato casserole and a pie from the bakery that cost $28, which felt like a luxury. Noah carried a tray of rolls he'd baked at the cafe during a slow hour because it was cheaper than buying them, and he didn't want me spending extra. We walk in, and Dad's Tesla is sitting in the driveway like a trophy. Clean, waxed, positioned so everyone would see it. Dad greeted Noah like a landlord greets a tenant who's late. Polite, but cold. Dinner started off fine. The usual small talk. Football on in the background. Melissa talking about Mason's future. Dad making comments about how kids today are soft, like he wasn't living off his kid. Noah stayed quiet. He's not a talkative teen. He listens more than he speaks. Then Melissa asked Noah, in that fake sweet tone, "So what are you doing these days?" "School and..." Noah answered honestly. "School and working." Dad perked up like he'd found an opening. "Working where?" Noah said, "A grocery store and a cafe, and I help a couple neighbors." Dad laughed. Not proud, not impressed, amused. "3 little jobs," he said, waving his fork. "And you still don't have anything to show for it." Noah's ears turned pink. He stared at his plate. Dad leaned in. "You're 16 and still don't have a job? Your cousin's already making 6 figures." The whole table went quiet for half a second. Then Melissa chuckled, like Dad had just told a cute joke. My son's face went fully red. Not embarrassed red. Humiliated red. Like his body was trying to protect him by turning into a warning sign. And that's when something in me snapped. Not like a tantrum. More like a circuit breaker finally flipping. I stood up. My chair scraped the floor, loud in that sudden silence, and everyone turned toward me like I'd just stood up in church. I looked at my dad and said, "You're right, Dad." Dad smirked. Like he'd won. I kept going. He has learned the value of hard work. Noah looked up at me, confused. I turned slightly so I could look at the whole table, not just Dad. Unlike some people who've been living off my $4,500 monthly gift for the past 8 years. Melissa's smile froze. Dad's eyes widened. "Brad." I didn't let him steer it. I kept my voice calm, because I knew if I raised it, he'd make it about my anger instead of his behavior. "That monthly gift," I said, "just became 0. You could have heard someone breathe." Dad pushed his napkin down hard. "You can't just..." "I can," I said. "It's my money." Then I nodded toward the window, toward the driveway. "And that Tesla in your driveway?" "Mine." Dad's mouth opened, then closed. I watched him do the math in real time. The loan, the insurance, the title, the fact that he didn't actually own the thing he bragged about. "I'm picking it up tomorrow," I said. "And I'm also calling the insurance company tonight to remove you as a driver." Noah made a small sound, like he'd inhaled sharply. Melissa jumped in, because she always jumps in when Dad's image is threatened. "Brad, what is wrong with you?" "It's Thanksgiving." I looked at her and said, "You're right. It is Thanksgiving. And my son came here after working this morning, bringing bread he baked himself, and he got insulted in front of everyone while my father sits in a house I pay for and drives a car I finance." Dad's face got blotchy. "Your mother." I held up my hand. Don't use Mom like a weapon." That name, Mom, hit him because it was the one thing he knew could still make me fold. But this time I didn't. I took a breath and looked at Noah. "Go put your jacket on, bud." He didn't move right away. He looked torn, like he was waiting for permission to exist. I softened my voice. "It's okay. We're leaving. And since I know how these stories go, let me pause here and ask you, what would you do if someone humiliated your kid like that? Would you stay to keep the peace? Or would you finally set the boundary you should have set years ago? Let me know in the comments. And yeah, hit like if you've ever been the family's personal ATM. Noah stood up, quietly, and went to the hallway. Dad stood too, and for a second I thought he might actually yell. But Dad doesn't like losing an audience. He likes winning in public. So he did what he always does. He tried to turn it around. He put a hand on his chest and said, "After everything I've done for you, Brad." I almost laughed. Almost. "What you've done?" I said. "You mean emotionally blackmailing me into paying your bills while you upgrade your lifestyle?" Melissa's husband finally spoke, awkward. "Gary, is that true? Brad's been paying?" Dad shot him a look that could freeze water. "It's family support." Aunt Marlene, who had been invited because she's family, but mostly because she's useful, cleared her throat. She'd been sitting quietly, watching, like she always does. She said, "It's not family support when it's automatic transfers of $4,500 a month for 8 years. Dad whipped his head toward her. "Marlene, stay out of it." She smiled, small and sharp. "No." Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. Because Aunt Marlene is the kind of person who brings receipts to a meal. She slid the folder onto the table. "Brad gave me access to his records last month because I told him to stop being naive. I hadn't actually planned to do this at Thanksgiving, but I had started preparing. Because the truth is, Dad had been escalating. He'd started asking for extra money, a kitchen remodel, a small loan for investments. And he'd slipped up once and mentioned a casino trip like it was normal. So yes, I called Aunt Marlene. And yes, we'd put everything in order. Bank statements, transfer logs, the Tesla paperwork, the loan documents, proof of insurance." Dad stared at the folder like it was a threat, because it was. Aunt Marlene turned to Melissa and said, "If you're so proud of Mason's 6 figures, maybe you can start supporting your father. Brad's done enough." Melissa's face flushed. "This is disgusting." "No," Aunt Marlene said. "What's disgusting is a grown man shaming a child for working while he lives off his son." My dad's voice went low. "Brad, sit down. You're embarrassing me." I looked at him and said, "You embarrassed yourself." Then I walked to the hallway, grabbed Noah's coat, and we left. In the car, Noah didn't speak for a full 5 minutes. I drove with my hands tight on the wheel, trying not to shake. Not because I regretted it, but because my body was finally releasing 8 years of stress like a flood. Finally, Noah said, very quietly, "I'm sorry." That broke me. I pulled into a parking lot and turned off the engine. "No," I said. "Noah, no. You didn't do anything wrong." He stared straight ahead. He made it sound like I'm failing. I swallowed hard. "You're not failing. You're carrying weight you shouldn't have to carry." He shrugged, but his eyes were wet. "I just didn't want you stressed." I reached over and squeezed his shoulder. "I'm proud of you. I'm also mad at myself that you felt like you had to do that." He wiped his face fast, like he was angry at the tears. "So we're not going back." I shook my head. "No." The next morning, I followed through. I called my bank and stopped the automatic transfer. I called my insurance and removed my dad as an authorized driver for the Tesla. Then I called my mechanic buddy to come with me the next day because I knew Dad would try something petty, like claiming the car was broken or hiding the key. And because I've learned you don't play soft with people who don't respect you, I called a lawyer. Not to destroy anyone, not to do revenge fantasy stuff, just to protect myself. My lawyer asked one question that made my stomach drop. "Do you have any written agreement that these transfers were loans?" I said no. My dad called them gifts. My lawyer said, "Then treat them like gifts you've decided to stop giving. Don't argue. Don't negotiate. Don't justify. You don't owe anyone an explanation for not handing them money." It sounded so simple, like a door I could have closed years ago. My dad called me 12 times that day. First it was angry, then it was wounded, then it was manipulative. He left a voicemail that said, "You're going to let your own father lose his house? Your mother would be ashamed." I didn't respond. Melissa texted me, "You're punishing Dad because you can't handle being called out. Noah needs to toughen up." I replied once, "Do not speak about my son again. Any further messages about money go through my attorney." Then I stopped replying. The next day, I went to my dad's house with Aunt Marlene and my friend Caleb, who knows cars and doesn't tolerate nonsense. Dad was waiting on the porch like a king expecting tribute. He said, "You're really doing this?" I said yes. He tried one more angle. "You can't take that car. I need it." I held up the key fob. I had the spare because I'd paid for everything and I'd kept control. Caleb walked around the Tesla, checked the tires, looked underneath, popped the trunk. Dad hovered like a vulture. Aunt Marlene stood beside me and said, calmly, "Gary, You don't own it. Dad glared at her. You always hated me. She shrugged. I hate what you do to people. Dad turned back to me and said, So what now? You think you're better than me? And I realized something in that moment. He didn't see the money as help. He saw it as proof he still had power. I said, This isn't about being better. It's about being done. I got in the car, adjusted the seat, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. I drove away. Over the next week, the family pressure came in waves. My aunt on my mom's side called and said, Brad, he's your father. I said, I know. That's why I helped him for 8 years. She said, But he's older. He can't work like you. I said, Then he needs to adjust his lifestyle like the rest of us. He's not entitled to my paycheck. Then I ended the call. A cousin messaged me. You know he's telling everyone you're abandoning him. I replied, He can tell whatever story he wants. I have bank statements. And that was the key. Facts. Dad thrives on emotion and shame. Facts starve that. Noah watched all of this quietly, like he didn't trust good things to last. One evening, about 10 days after Thanksgiving, we were sitting at my kitchen table eating leftovers, and Noah said, So, I don't have to keep working 3 jobs. I almost cried again. I said, No, you can keep one job if you want spending money and experience. But you're not working to keep the lights on. That's my job. He nodded slowly, like he was trying to let that sink in. Then he said, Grandpa's going to hate me. I said, Noah, your grandpa hates losing control. That's different. And I told him something I wish someone had told me at 16. You don't earn love by suffering, I said. You earn respect by having boundaries. A month later, Dad listed the house for sale. He didn't tell me directly. I heard it through Melissa, who called like she was delivering a tragedy. He might have to downsize, she said, dramatic. I said, Good. She was silent. That's cold. I said, It's reality. My lawyer advised me not to engage, and I followed that advice like it was oxygen. Dad tried to show up at my apartment once. He banged on the door like he still owned me. I didn't open it. I texted him one line. Do not come here again. Communicate through my attorney. He sent a string of messages calling me ungrateful, accusing Aunt Marlene of poisoning me, and claiming Noah was lazy because I coddled him. I didn't reply. Noah saw the messages anyway because teenagers notice everything, even when you try to shield them. He handed my phone back and said, He doesn't know me at all. I said, No, he knows what he wants you to be. And here's the part one didn't expect. Cutting my dad off didn't just change my bank account. It changed my nervous system. I slept better. I stopped bracing every time my phone buzzed. I stopped doing mental math in the grocery aisle like a hostage negotiator. I took Noah to open a savings account in his name. A real one. Not a help dad fund. A future fund. Aunt Marlene helped me restructure my finances like I was one of her clients. She didn't baby me. She didn't lecture. She just treated it like reality. One evening, she came over for dinner. Just simple pasta, and she looked at Noah and said, Your dad did something hard. Noah nodded. Then she looked at me and said, You did too. Don't backslide. I promised her I wouldn't. Melissa and I barely talk now. Not because I screamed at her. Not because I destroyed anyone. Because the relationship was built on me staying in my place, and I'm not in that place anymore. My dad eventually moved into a smaller condo across town. He still tells people I abandoned him. I'm sure he still plays the victim. That's his favorite role. But he's not homeless. He's not starving. He's just living within his means for the first time in decades. And Noah? Noah still works at the cafe on Saturdays because he likes his coworkers and he likes having his own money. But he quit the grocery store and he stopped doing yard work unless he actually wants to. He joined a school club. He started laughing more. He looks lighter. On a quiet Sunday afternoon not long ago, we were both in the living room. I was sorting paperwork for tax season, and he was doing homework. It was boring, peaceful life stuff. He looked up and said, Dad? I said, Yeah. He said, Thanks for standing up. I didn't make it dramatic. I just nodded. But inside, I felt something settle. Because walking away wasn't revenge. It was survival. Real family is who shows up with respect, not who shares your DNA and sends you a bill. And these days, I choose who gets a front row seat in my life. So what did I learn? That real love doesn't come with an invoice. That protecting your kid matters more than keeping the peace. That the word family can be weaponized if you let it. I spent 8 years paying for my father's approval, and all I got was debt and a son who thought suffering was how you earn belonging. The hardest boundary I ever set became the greatest gift I gave us both. Sometimes walking away isn't abandonment. It's finally choosing yourself. And Noah? He learned something better than I did at his age. His worth isn't measured by what he can provide.